Hello?
Hello.
I have to take it.
Okay, I'll
sorry.
mute you.
Okay.
You're muted.
Hi, Donna. She's not on audio yet.
He is in
She didn't
focus
audio
mode.
yet. Yeah, she didn't audio yet. Yeah.
You about ready?
We're ready.
Hi, Lori. I'm Steve.
I'm Lori. Nice to meet you.
We're all amongst our group here. It might be best if we all introduced ourselves to her, and that way we can get acquainted.
I'm
Steve.
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not hearing you guys. Is it you or is it my computer? Because my
We hear-
computer has just moved to a new apartment, so I don't know if it's my computer or if it's yours. But I
I
can't.
hear you. I hear you fine. It's just
Hear you. Yeah.
maybe
Okay.
it's your
Well,
audio that's
I'll try to hear you.
Okay, if you have any comments, just use the chat format. See the chat on the bottom?
I'm familiar with Zoom. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Marcia
introduce
Gratz.
ourselves to
Hi.
everyone.
I am Marcia. Anybody else want to say hi to Lori?
I'm Shirley.
I'm sorry. I'm Bernie and I'm outside of Denver.
Uh-huh.
Very nice to meet all of you.
Nice to meet you as well and welcome.
Lori, are you local?
I am local. I'm a member at Congregation Beth Israel.
Oh,
Nice.
Okay, very nice.
Yes. So, but I heard about your class and I'm always interested in Torah. So it's nice to be able to join you and check out what you've got going on and participate.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Well,
Okay, if I
welcome
get
and-
another call, you'll excuse me. I have a situation here. So.
Okay, we'll
Okay.
meet you.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm trying
Back
to
when you can.
And Lori, this is Evelyn. Evelyn, she's on the lower bottom of our screen. That's Lori.
Yeah, I have to leave at noon. I have an appointment at 12:30, so.
Okay, all right. Rabbi, let's go ahead and start with the blessings.
Blessing.
Lori, do you have the sheet of the brachas?
La Sok B'Divrei Torah.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm familiar with it.
okay. Let us begin then. Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah Adonai
Eloheinu
Eloheinu melech haolam,
asher
v'kiddushanu b'mitzvot tov,
v'tzivanu
v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God,
ruler
ruler
of
of
the
the
world,
world,
who has
who has
sanctified
specified
us
us.
with commandments and command us to engage in the words of Torah.
Torah.
Okay, just a reminder, please remember to raise your hand if you want to speak. Let's make it orderly. Thank you very much, and it's all yours, Rabbi.
Thank you, Steve, and good morning, everyone. I've nominated Steve to join the police department. And so I think he could bring order to our streets and, you know, in a genteel but firm manner. So good morning and welcome to Lori.
Thank
And welcome to all those far and near. We have Shirley from Alabama and Bernie from Colorado. And do we have somebody from Alaska? No, not yet.
Not today.
We're working on that.
And somebody from outer space.
We've invited the extraterrestrial beings to join us. But they're not the most studious group. They like just exploring the space, and they don't read so much. But we are on page 105, and this is in Harvey Field's book, Parak Olive at the bottom of the page, Finding Meaning in Obsolete Traditions. And this is, of course, a tremendous trigger just to hear the title, Finding Meaning in Obsolete Traditions. I'm going to, hi Pam, welcome. I'm going to probably talk this Friday about I've been doing some contemporary thoughts finally. And last week was on Israel, what's going on in Israel. And this week I may talk about the new University of Chicago poll that shows the tremendous changes over the last 25 years in people's attitudes towards patriotism and religion and family and all the things, and even apple pie has become less popular. All right, that's a joke. But all the things that we associate with 1950s America have really fallen out of favor. And so for those of us who are kind of halfway between the 50s and the 2020s, then, we're pulled in different directions. So this is very relevant. So we, of course, are now in the second parsha of the book of Leviticus. And so it's Parshat Tzav. And as you probably are very keenly aware, Leviticus, especially the first part, tends to be rather dry. And so Harvey Fields is good at this, is picking a topic that is not dry. So I'll open it up for some brief opening comments or questions or statements. And hello, Riva, welcome. And on either the topic of the book of Leviticus or the topic that Harvey Fields has of finding meaning in obsolete traditions. Raise your hands vis-a-vis Steve's directives, and we can take 3 or 4 comments. Good morning, Riva, and welcome. Evelyn.
The mere fact that he says that it is obsolete means that he himself already feels that it has no relevance in today's society. By calling it obsolete, by its very definition, means it is out of date and has no meaning in today's society. And so how I read it and I felt that there really wasn't much there that made it relevant to today's culture, in spite of what all the examples that he illustrated. That was my own personal opinion. Are you there?
Still?
Yeah, I
Uh-oh.
hear you.
Wow.
Everybody.
Yeah, the screen
Okay.
froze.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. I don't know. It says my internet connection is unstable.
It's us, all of us, I think.
Um,
We're all unstable.
Well, I mean, if you're an Orthodox Jew, then the mitzvot remain obligatory, and God is very much a living reality who is still up there commanding you to do all these mitzvot, and that's relevant. It doesn't have to be relevant to the culture. The halacha makes the culture, or should make the culture. And if the culture of your broader society doesn't sync with your halacha culture, you withdraw from contemporary society, right? So the ultra-Orthodox don't allow their kids to watch TV, and so forth. So, but for us that we're kind of caught in between, then the question, as Evelyn points out, is how do we define the word obsolete? Because according to the new University of Chicago study, basically religion is obsolete entirely, not just keeping kosher or putting up a mezuzah or any one of 10 or 15 other things, but the entire concept of religion is obsolete. So if you don't want to go along with that, that puts you in a liminal space where you have to figure out how to negotiate back and forth. Other comments, Pam or Riva or Lori, whenever you're ready, you can raise your hand and jump in.
Okay, I'm not shy.
Okay, good.
Then you'll fit right in.
Marcia, Pam, Riva. Marcia.
So what to what you were just saying, the very fact that you're observing it makes it relevant is to the Orthodox, that they are observing makes it relevant. How do they equate it with what their daily life, and let's take a particular, or if it's kashrut or something obvious like that. What makes it a relevant situation to observe kashrut? Just because it says so in the Torah?
Well, and they believe God wrote that and God is watching. So God may not punish you if you eat a pork chop, but God told you not to eat that pork chop, and God is observing that you're eating the pork chop. So it's relevant because you're in a direct relationship with an omnipotent, omniscient being who told you what to do and what not to do. And the culture then is guided by these rules.
So, excuse me, hand up.
He was smiling. Yes.
So the pork chop, there's nothing evil about the pork chop, except that God said, don't eat the pork chop, right?
Correct.
So does this go down on my permanent record when I eat the pork chop? I mean, to what happens to make it a bad thing, except that it says so?
Well,
know.
it's not necessarily bad, but it dictates the culture, and it's not obsolete, because if God told you not to do something, if I'm your rabbi, if I tell you, Marcia, please don't do something, you may or may not do it because you want to be nice to me and you don't want to do, at least make it too obvious that you're going to just completely ignore what I said. So if God tells you something, all the more so. So it's not obsolete because it's very much a living reality. But for us, depending on our theologies, right? And we have in the Reform movement different theologies, different approaches to God. And so if we assume that many of us have the distant God belief or the benevolent God belief, then it may not be as central to our affairs, and therefore it's more at risk of becoming obsolete. But this is my question: how do we define obsolete, Babette?
Oh, I was going to say something else before you talked about the obsolete. If they want to say that observant people, that it doesn't make a difference. Did they want to make comparisons about people who don't observe anything? I mean, we have 10 commandments: steal, murder, covet. In the general society, those people who are no goodniks, how many of them come from a structured or religious background, and those who had nothing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Donna and then Evelyn. Donna, I muted
Donna, you have to unmute.
I muted you because you were on the phone, so
You see the unmute? There we go.
Now she's muted.
I'm sorry I muted you, but I had to. All right. We'll come back to you, Donna. Sorry. Evelyn.
There she is.
Okay.
okay.
Donna.
Go ahead, Donna.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because I still can't hear you guys very well. When God told us not to eat pork, I decided I'd check on this. So for whatever reason, I checked on this cancer research area in Southern California, and because they did not serve pork to their patients. I said, why not? They said, because the pig cannot be bled. It doesn't have the big vessels like the cow does. And so that it cannot be bled. It just has little vessels that run through the whole body. And so this is the reason that they said, you can believe what they say, or you can believe what they not say, or whatever. But this is the information that I was given at that time.
So you're saying that a certain mitzvah not to do something is not obsolete because it has medical benefit. You could say the same thing about prayer. Prayer relaxes us and lowers our blood pressure, and therefore helps us live longer and certainly more serene lives. You could say that observing Shabbat does the same. You could, that, but you're now in a polemical situation where you're justifying certain practices. So Riva will say, well, the Torah study helps my brain and keeps my thoughts active, and then wards off dementia, and therefore it has a benefit. But I could say, well, I just think you should study Torah lishma, for no purpose. And then somebody said, but then it's obsolete. It has to have a purpose in contemporary society. And many of these purposes might be health related or lifestyle related, quote unquote. Okay, yes, Lori.
Okay, so I have a theory. I don't necessarily agree that they're obsolete. Some of them. Judaism teaches that obedience to the will of God is rewarded and disobedience is punished. So I think when we're looking at these commandments that we're given, we have a choice, like it says in Parsha Rieh, behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. The blessing, if ye shall hearken unto the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you this day, and the curse, if you shall not hearken unto the commandments of the Lord your God. So, I mean, there's, it gives you that choice, every moment of our life, we're at that crossroads, where we have to make a choice. So some of the commandments, like let's say stoning somebody who doesn't attend Shabbat, I think that particular commandment, I think that we've learned also, and then it says in Deuteronomy, do that which is right and good in the sight of the Lord. So we have to determine, is it right? Is it good? So I think there are choices in certain areas, but I think ultimately it's about making the choice to obey God.
Evelyn, responding to Lori?
In a way, yes. I am thinking of the ultra-Orthodox who think they are closer to God than any of us because they are obeying all of God's tenets, they claim. However, how do you explain when in the culture and, excuse me, oh gosh, okay, how in the culture of the Orthodox, they, how should I say it? There are thieves, there are murderers, there are leechers, they run the same spectrum of human behavior as everyone else. And my feelings are that they are, in spite of the fact that they claim that they obey the 10 Commandments and all of the other edicts, that they are really, in my estimation, no better. I can't believe this.
I think that what maybe Lori is suggesting is that the Torah is presenting us with a choice, and that every person has to make that choice. And what exactly that choice is between blessings and curses, we need to interpret for the modern era. Maybe I'll go back to Lori if she wants to add something on that.
Well, I believe it was the Shabbat Emet that taught that at every moment of our life, we're at a crossroads where we can choose to do something. And I'm probably slaughtering his beautiful words, but I'll try to interpret as best as I remember, that we have a choice to choose that which will bring about a blessing and that which will bring about a curse, which to me says that the sum of our reality, is largely based on our choice. I mean, obviously we can't control everything, but we can control when we earn a blessing and when we don't. So, I mean, I definitely feel like the Orthodox, I think there's good and bad in everyone. So I understand what you're saying, that they're not perfect as an entirety, but I don't think to say, I mean, I think if they choose to, observe that level of observance and that works for them, maybe that's what, how their lives are blessed. So I respect their choice. It's not the choice I want to make. But I do want to at least say there's good and bad in all denominations, in Reform, conservative, I'm sure you could find people who aren't, acting appropriately in every denomination.
Okay, Marcia, thank you, Lori.
Thank you. That it's so nice to have a new voice. Thank you for joining us. Are there 613? Is that the number commandments? What is?
Correct. But that is, of course, a theoretical construct that was first mentioned in the Talmud. And many of those 613 can only be done if there's a temple. So
Because of what do you call it? The sacrifices and such.
So
Okay.
Maimonides and others in the medieval times did make a list of those 613, because even if you can't do many of them, they still are a core teachings. But the practical halacha, what is done in terms of laws for today, would only be, 250 or 350 of those 600.
But even so, to even know the 250, one has to be a biblical scholar, one would think. I mean, to have that in the forefront of your mind as you progress through life, it would be so limiting in everything that you do, I don't know, walk on this side of the street or the other. I don't know what's in there, all those different.
But Marcia, how do you feel about this concept of obsolete? Do you think that
I think some of them are obsolete. I think they're not relevant. I think following the 10 Commandments is a good base to go.
Are there things that I advocate for that you feel are obsolete?
For instance?
I don't know. I mean, are there things that, I've been your rabbi now for 4 years. Do I encourage you and others to do certain things that you say, well, the rabbi is saying that because he's a rabbi, but that's completely obsolete?
I can't think of one, but then I can't think of what you've been advocating recently. So.
Well, I try to be discreet. Pam.
I keep thinking about the Indiana Jones movie where he goes into this cavern and he has to pick the right vessel,
Right.
him and the rest. And the voice of God says, choose carefully.
Wounds up being the humble one, right? Or something, yes.
Okay, well, let's start reading. We're at the bottom, page 105, left-hand column, Perek Aleph, finding meaning in obsolete traditions. Minya's not here today, so it might fall to Evelyn if she's willing to, choose blessings.
Okay. Yeah. Finding meaning in obsolete traditions. Parshat Tzav presents a detailed description of the sacrifices offered in the first sanctuary of the Jewish people as they wandered through the Sinai desert. Most scholars believe that the description applies also to the sacrifices that were brought to the Jerusalem temple after it was built by King Solomon in the 10th century BCE.
Okay, stop. So we're talking about sacrifices and the temple. Two obsolete concepts, question mark, Sai?
There he is.
Sai, do you want to talk about the temple? Do you think that, no? Okay, anyone else? Babette?
We don't. Okay.
Marcia?
We don't have the temple. So you just said that that's not an obligation.
Yeah, but you could rebuild a temple.
Oh, the obligation to rebuild.
No, you could rebuild it and start doing all the stuff in the temple.
Are we reading from a particular handout that you was
Yes,
included?
it was sent to you in the email, hopefully. There should be a download with it's from page 105. Do you see the email?
I have it. Okay, I have it in front of me now. Thank you.
Okay.
So, it might well be that if we had a temple in Jerusalem, the Jewish religion might have an upsurge, when you think about it.
Okay, well.
I don't see it happening, but I could understand that.
We could start fundraising for it,
There you go.
We've given enough money for trees now, so we could start giving money for the temple. but they've got very advanced construction techniques there, all the best builders, so they could build a very nice temple.
Not
Um,
on the mount probably though, so.
They could take part of that. I heard a plan to
Oh,
leave the
Yeah,
mosque.
Donna told us about that, yeah.
Yes, and just build a temple next to the two mosques. That would be quite quite a thing. But is there any point in it? Isn't that obsolete? I mean, I guess the reform position was that having a temple is obsolete, right? When the first reformed temple in Charleston, Reverend Gustavus Poznansky gave a big speech, which was published in the Charleston paper. This is in the 1820s, saying, Charleston is my Jerusalem, and this synagogue is my temple. My temple meaning the temple. And that is where we call our synagogues temples and not synagogues. That's a sign of a reformed synagogue. It's a rejection of the idea of rebuilding a temple. And it's saying that having a real temple with animal sacrifices is, quote unquote, obsolete.
So if there, excuse me, if there was a temple,
Okay, bye, Riva.
if there was a new temple in Jerusalem, would that negate all the synagogues and congregations and such around the world?
Well, that would be up to the rabbis in Israel. They're not going to ask me, but I mean, if they built a temple in Jerusalem, we would keep going here in Arizona just like we were before. I don't think it would, it would only make our synagogue obsolete if we felt, obsolete is something you feel or don't feel, right?
Right.
Like when does a car that you have to drive become obsolete? It's when you feel that a self-driving car is just better and newer. When did the VHS tapes become obsolete? It's something you just feel that, your friends say you're still using that. Evelyn.
The theory that a temple, this is just hypothetical, but the theory that a temple would be reconstructed in Jerusalem would not go over well with the rest of the world, because not only is our temple a place of worship, it is also a community center. The temple originally in Jerusalem, people came at the 3 times a year and congregated, but it was not intended to be a social event. It was a strictly religious event with all of the ritual that was required, with the sacrifices and everything else. The rest of the world, the diaspora, has evolved its own way of celebrating Judaism. And an important part of our temple is the social aspect. It is a congregating place where we can come to enjoy each other's company, not only celebrating the ritual on Friday night, but also a place to gather where the community can come together and know each other. And I don't think anyone is willing to give that up. And
Okay,
so,
so-
as I say, this is all hypothetical.
So you don't think a synagogue in Arizona is going to become obsolete, at least not for that reason? But do you think that the idea of one central temple with animal sacrifices and with a high priest, I'd previously admitted that I would be looking to get a job as a high priest there because I am a Kohen.
We know.
I've expressed my frustration that my odds for getting such a appointment are probably rather dismally low, unfortunately, for various reasons. So, but with a temple, I mean, could you see a temple somehow having some sense of relevancy and importance were there to be a temple, in addition to, we're not going to take the synagogue away from Evelyn, we promise, but would my sermons on Friday night refer to what they did in the temple that week? I mean, in Jerusalem, is that a possibility? Pam, you look skeptical.
I can't see it.
I can't see it coming.
Okay, Evelyn, back to you. Keep reading.
Okay, during the period when thousands of people journeyed to Jerusalem to offer their sacrifices, the Torah's instructions on how the priests were to prepare and receive these sacrifices must have been extremely important. If they were not prepared correctly or offered properly, they were unacceptable. Therefore, knowing and following the directions of the Torah concerning sacrifices was a high priority for both the people and the priests. Studying the details for the presentation of each sacrifice had great importance.
And
After the temple was
hold it,
destroyed by the
Evelyn.
Romans,
Hold it, Evelyn. Just let me interject.
I can't
here.
hear.
You can't hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Huh.
You can hear me. Can you hear me now? So I had when I was in Israel in rabbinical school, you know, a long time ago, I had a friend who also was a Kohen, and he went to study in Ateret Kohanim Yeshiva, which is a yeshiva in Jerusalem that is devoted primarily to preparing for the rebuilding of the temple. So they spent 12, 14 hours a day studying the laws related to functioning in the temple. What does a Kohen have to do? How do they have to offer the sacrifices? How do they choose the animals? What happens in certain cases where something goes wrong? All of this. And so there are now, and it's a big yeshiva, very well funded by a North American named Irving Moskowitz, gives them millions and millions of dollars a year. They also buy real estate and in Jerusalem to expand. And so they're ready to go, and they spend most of their time studying these exact laws. So they don't feel that it is quote unquote obsolete, but I think that most of us think that that would be largely a waste of time to spend more than a few hours on the laws of how to offer a sacrifice. And if we did study it, we'd want to see, well, what is the broader significance? What is the underlying philosophic principles or something like that, rather than the actual laws? But for them, the actual laws are the point, because God wants us to do these rituals rather than ceremonies, and a ritual has to be done in the exact manner prescribed. Okay, comments or Evelyn, sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
We
Muted.
now, we can't,
Evelyn, you have to unmute, hon.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay,
Okay.
wait,
Can you
Sai
hear
has
me?
to, wait, Sai.
I'm sorry.
What always concerns me is how these rules come into being. I always get the impression that they are arbitrarily set up by people who have power. And the little guy never has a chance in any of these things as far as having something to say or getting something done. And this is what bothers me about the whole religion. It's concerns a few people who make the decisions and expect everybody to live by them.
So Sai, you're arguing that the entire book of Leviticus is obsolete.
To a degree, yes.
Sai wants to hedge just slightly there. So before he said yes, he said to a degree. So, but basically, you know, if we accept your argument that the book of Leviticus and all of the laws in it about how to offer the sacrifices was written by a group of Kohanim, my ancestors, I'd like to point out, then
We know.
yes. So you know, other than the vested interests that they had and the social stability, it did provide a certain social stability at the time. It provided people a way to express religious urges or yearnings, but Sai doesn't seem to feel that that's so important today, or that he can express his religious yearnings in other ways that are more productive. Bernie.
Time-wise, what's the relative time that the Leviticus is believed to have been written compared to when the temple was actually in existence?
Oh, that's a very loaded question, but it's very possible Book of Leviticus was at least redacted in its form that we have it, say 400, 500, 600 years after the first temple was destroyed.
But the second temple had not yet been built or destroyed.
It may have been around the time of the building of the second temple.
Okay.
I could check that for you a little bit more,
Oh,
but so I think it became relevant once again because there was either the second temple was already there, or they were planning to rebuild it. Remember, the first temple was only destroyed from 586 to 444, so it was like 80 years, 120 years, something like that. So it wasn't that long as these things go. So even during the period when it was destroyed, they were planning to rebuild.
I was just trying to find out whether the second temple had already been destroyed when Leviticus was thought to have been written.
It was
Okay.
definitely from way before that. The second temple wasn't destroyed till 70, and the book of Leviticus was long available
Okay.
in a separate edition. It wasn't part of the Torah. The 5 books of Moses as a single work did not get unified until after destruction, Second Temple. The Bible was not made into quote unquote holy scriptures until shortly after the destruction, Second Temple. But the book of Leviticus existed, and contrary to what Sai would have wanted, it was regarded as part of the holy writings that was definitely going to be included. And I was always against that as well, so I sympathized with Sai, but neither he nor I had much influence in those days. Other comments, Lori?
I'm checking. I'm looking. I might have something to say.
Okay. Meanwhile, Evelyn.
Okay, should I read the next paragraph?
Yes.
Okay. After the temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE, and the offering of sacrifices was replaced by prayer, many must have asked, do these descriptions and commandments concerning the offering of sacrifices still have any meaning for us? Are they obsolete? Is there anything for us to learn from these details about the Olah, Mincha, Hatat, Hasham, and Zevach Shalomim offerings?
Okay, stop. So these are the sacrifices that are mentioned in this week's Parsha and in the book of Leviticus is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 different sacrifices for 5 different purposes at 5 different times or different times. So there's different sacrifices which are described. And the Chatat, for example, is a sin offering. So if you've done something bad, part of your atonement is to offer sacrifice. Some of the others are just standard sacrifices that are offered at particular times of the day, and some are holiday offerings and so forth. But when the second temple was destroyed in 70, remember this had happened before. And you ask, how was the second temple destroyed? And you see that there's a new book out about the big war against Rome that goes into great detail about how Jews were fighting with other Jews, and while the Romans were surrounding the city of Jerusalem, Jews were killing other Jews, and it was just a mess. And you think, how could they be so incredibly incompetent and fight with each other and so on? Then you see what's going on in Israel today, and you begin to see, well, it's not that much different. And you could easily see how what's going on today in Israel could continue to spiral out of control and get much worse and lead to the same. And in fact, if you look at the Times of Israel or other papers talking about this, there's probably Jewish people writing in the comments saying, you know, now we understand how the Second Temple was destroyed and the Second Jewish Commonwealth destroyed. The same thing. You have two extremes, they fight with each other, they refuse to compromise, and it gets worse and worse. And then, you know, the enemies outside, destroy you because you're too busy, preoccupied with this. But when the Second Temple was destroyed, most Jews probably felt this was a temporary thing, and that within a few decades or so, the Romans would allow the Jews to rebuild the temple. And that might have happened, but it didn't. And for various reasons, the Romans, didn't, it became less and less likely with the passing of years due to internal Roman politics. If it had been me at the time, knowing what I know now, which is a big thing, I would have said, let's go back to the original idea where we allow Jews to build full temples with sacrifices wherever they want. And let's build 5 or 6 little temples in different parts of the world. Not just in Israel, you could build a real Jewish temple anywhere you'd like. But the authorities didn't want that because, Sai would point out, they wanted control, and control is power, and power is money, and they wanted to keep one central temple in Jerusalem and only. But that, turned out not to be a good idea.
I have a question, please. In the period of shortly after the diaspora, when the Jews were being scattered all over the world, they were essentially migrants until they settled in whatever country that they settled in.
Correct.
Is there any proof or any evidence that they actually erected temples?
Yes, earlier, yes. There was, for example, Elephantine, which is an island in the Nile in Egypt, around, I think, 500 BCE. They were Jews that had come from Israel. They had a job. They were hired as a group to be mercenaries. And so they had this island that they had to defend and control as hired professional soldiers. And they lived there for generations. And they had their own temple. When they built their temple, when they came from Israel, Jews were allowed to build temples wherever they went.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Later, much later, the pagans, there was a big fight, and the pagans destroyed the Jewish temple. And the Jews there sent a letter to Israel saying, can you help us with money to rebuild our temple? And the people and all of this was found, they had an archives that was discovered. And the people in Jerusalem I don't think there's a letter from them back, but we know what they would have said. They would have said, you don't have any authority to build a Jewish temple. There's only one Jewish temple and it's in Jerusalem. You can't, how dare you that you even had it to begin with? And this must have been a shock to the Jews in Elephantine because they had no idea. Remember, this is before the internet. So even though Egypt was relatively very close to Israel, they had no idea that they weren't supposed to have a temple.
I'm thinking.
Burning.
I couldn't find the button. Does it actually say in the Torah that you can only have one temple in one spot?
No, and the word Jerusalem, I don't think is mentioned in the Torah. And the idea that there's only one temple is not, no, I don't think so. No.
And how did all this come to be?
Well, ask Sai, right? Sai can give you a rather historical answer, which stresses the socioeconomic factors and with an
Somebody
emphasis.
had to take charge.
You think he was there then?
Look at Sai's smile.
Sai was there. Sai was there.
Sai is being vindicated. Everything Sai said turned out to be right. But just because people have an economic incentive to centralize control doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad idea. It doesn't mean that everything they're doing is necessarily quote unquote obsolete, right? You could do something that's incredibly profitable, but also is very relevant and everybody loves it, right?
Like Disneyland.
Marcia, do you disagree with that last comment?
No, no.
Okay.
Go
All
along
right,
with it.
all right, Evelyn, Pam, and then back to Evelyn.
Well, the Catholic Church is centralized in Rome,
Ah, okay.
and I think I'm thinking that the Jews made a deliberate thought that they wouldn't be centralized somewhere, that they would the Jewish thing would appear at each country, in a way that fit that country.
That's a very good point. I think that before the Catholics even existed, we Jews, or the people in Jerusalem that Sai's referring to, made a tremendous effort to centralize. And because of what happened with the Romans, this centralization process failed. And then most Jews decided, or out of either ideology or necessity, to build a decentralized model. And this is true to this day. Like, each synagogue is basically independent, right? Like the head of the Reform movement isn't going to call us up and tell us what to do in Arizona, right? And if he did, we would tell him, there was a Yiddish expression a few weeks ago. I'm not going to repeat it because I don't know Yiddish, but it would be a polite way of saying, no, we're not going to listen to you. And even in non-Catholic denominations like, the Methodists send their ministers to churches. The churches don't choose their ministers. I remember in Albany, Georgia, there was a very large Methodist church with an incredibly popular minister, and we had a very close relationship with them. And one day the bishop said he was moving this guy and he wanted to put him in an administrative job. This guy was such a talented pulpit minister. And then the guy resisted, and eventually they moved him to Savannah, Georgia, to another church. And they brought in a new minister who closed down everything he was doing, including all interfaith activities. I called her up and she wouldn't even take my call. And we had like had pulpit exchanges, and our scholar in residence went over there, and we'd done everything together. So we're very much on the extreme individualistic end as a religion today, at least as a few of you said, the way we do it out in America. In Israel, it's a very different situation, and that plays into a lot of the current tensions in diaspora-Israel relations. Marcia.
Do you think at some point the Jews of the time, after the second temple was destroyed, they said, hey, we keep building it, they keep destroying it. The world is getting bigger. And how many, as we see people in other countries, which we didn't even know about years ago, oh, look, there's Spain and there's this and there's that. Maybe we should approach this in a different way so that people everywhere will have the opportunity to have a place to pray.
And that's what a lot of Jews in the pews thought, and a lot of the rabbis in Israel tried to fight against that. So
That's very provincial.
Well, if you're a rabbi in Israel, you want power and control.
Right.
I mean, and you believe that it's for the good of the religion, right? As we said, power and control doesn't mean you're evil. It just, you may believe, it may be true that what you're going to advocate for is better.
Well, but I don't want to speak out of turn, but if Jewish people are not proselytizers in general, but for the religion to expand, there has to be opportunity to have a place to pray as a group.
And we
One
were
would think the ideal model would be that.
We
Okay.
were proselytizers, by the way, up to a certain point, and then that was
Oh, okay.
that was stopped because as the Roman Empire became Christianized, there were laws against it, and it became a capital offense to proselytize somebody from Christianity to Judaism,
But generally speaking, nowadays, it's not a thing. you
but
know.
it was.
If it was, okay, but yes, it's power, but it's also to the detriment of your goal of to expand the bring people to the religion, not actively doing it, to be able to have a place for them to go. And if they're in another land, they're not coming back to even a camp in Jerusalem to have thrice yearly prayers, you know?
I think Marcia's speaking as a typical American Reformed Jew. But if you were an Israeli Orthodox Jew, your perspective would be quite different. Any other comments? Okay, back to you, Evelyn.
Okay. For Torah interpreters, since the destruction of the temple, such questions have constantly been asked and imaginatively answered. Sometimes a commentator will find a word or phrase describing a ritual of the sacrifice that calls to mind significant moral lesson or symbolizes an important truth about human life. At other times, a command about an offering will remind a commentator of another statement or description in the biblical tradition. And in exploring the meaning of both, new insights are born.
Okay, there you go. So this is the origins of Torah study, and we try to look in these rules, even if the thing we're talking about is obsolete, for some insight which is not obsolete. Is that acceptable to everyone? That we could study the sacrifices all year and find interesting ideas in those sacrifices. Even the sacrifices themselves are maybe obsolete. Would that be acceptable to you?
I think sometimes it's a stretch.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we did make an effort a few months ago to expand our repertoire to all these other sources, and that didn't really work that well, but we tried. Okay, back to you, Evelyn.
All right, several examples of finding or even inventing meanings from what seem like obsolete and irrelevant descriptions of ancient rituals are presented below. Do you wish me to go on and read about the various?
Yes, let's do example one.
Okay. Rabbi Levi, who lived during the 3rd century, pointed out that the word olah, meaning burnt offering, can also be read and translated as Allah, meaning behave boastfully. Therefore, he argued, the Torah's statements, this is the law concerning the olah, it shall go up upon its burning place on the altar, can be understood to mean, this is the law concerning the Allah, the boastful person. He shall be destroyed by fire. In other words, when you're reading Hebrew, it depends upon the signs underneath each letter. And so therefore, does that mean then that it's how it is interpreted by the reader, Rabbi?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. To prove his point, Rabbi Levi cites several examples of insolence or pretentious behavior that were punished by fire. For instance, Noah's generation suffered the flood. For their injustice and selfishness, however, they were also punished by fire. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah suffered destruction by fire for their cruel treatment of strangers and their snobbish and arrogant behavior towards one another. Genesis 19:24. Pharaoh was punished by fire because he boastfully questioned God's power, saying, who is God that I should heed and let Israel go from Egypt? Exodus. By reading the word Allah for olah, Rabbi Levi avoids dealing with the discussion of the burnt offering and focuses instead upon the dangers of acting in a boastful, self-centered, and prideful way. The haughty or arrogant person, he declares, will ultimately end up as a burnt sacrifice on his or her own altar.
Okay, comments? Bernie.
I say this often, But this is another one of somebody just talking to have himself heard. If the Torah had meant us to interpret it his way, wouldn't it have written it that way?
Well, but we're stuck with the text we're stuck with. So we're trying to build a, intellectual tradition that's not literal. So what's wrong with reinterpreting?
It's okay to do it, but not just for the sake of doing it. And I think that's what happens more often than not.
Why not just, why not?
Just the guy's talking to make him, just to hear himself talk.
Oh, I see that there's some support for your view, but that's what makes Jewish intellectualism, that we can take any text, no matter how arcane and obsolete, and transform it through some clever grammatical changes into something that maybe deals with the basic issues of character. Isn't that a good thing? No.
And has something to say.
Okay. Please don't let Bernie write comments on Yelp about my sermons. Pam.
We're just all grateful that you have not gone down that route.
It's just
That is the stretch I was talking about. It's just like,
Yeah, I agree with Rabbi Bernie. Some of these guys just, they need a hobby.
okay. Lori, will you want to defend Rabbi Levy?
So I definitely would, I don't think I would defend Rabbi Levy. I think he left out some important situations in the Torah or in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible itself, where somebody was destroyed by fire. I mean, Uzzah touched the ark when the cow had stumbled and he died instantly. And that's believed to, my commentary teaches me that was due to irreverence for God, like he should not have touched the ark. So, and then there was Nadab and Abihu, right? They were consumed by fire. It's been thought that, since the conversation God has directly after with Aaron, I don't have the text in front of me, but it has been interpreted that perhaps they were drunk, which would be not showing correct reverence for God. So I think there are examples of people who died by fire, let's just say, that were directly related to not showing enough reverence to God. So I don't feel like, I don't think that it's the boastful person. I don't think Uzzah was being boastful. I think he was literally trying to save the ark from faltering, but it wasn't his place to touch it. And so he died at that moment.
Mhm.
Or we could look at it this way. He went to save the ark and it was such a precious gift to God that he had done that he was spared from whatever his life would have been. And God took him at that moment in mercy. Who knows? I mean, when David wanted to build the temple, God said, well, it's good that it's in your heart, but you're not appropriate for the job, essentially. So I feel like, there's reasons why God chooses people for different things at different times. But I don't think I would defend Rabbi Levi. I don't think I would defend him. I think that the burnt offering, isn't that the one where your offering is
Yeah,
you're self-surrendering to the will of God?
right.
Okay, so
I believe the whole sacrifice is burned. Most of the sacrifice is only a very small portion is burnt, and most of it is distributed to the people offering the sacrifice and to the Kohanim and Leviim as meat to be eaten. But I don't think in the burnt sacrifice that's done.
So, I mean, I'm trying to get my thoughts together so I can clearly articulate. So I'm still finding my voice with everything I've learned. So bear with me.
Okay. Responses or comments on what Lori said or Rabbi Levy? Rabbi Levy has not made friends among Bernie and Pam and probably Cy. Does he have any support from any? And Lori is not there either. Is there anyone that supports Rabbi Levy? I like this. Nobody likes this. You know, in Eastern Europe 150 years ago, they called this part of Pilpul, you know, where it was pointless intellectualism and it was
Yes.
criticized.
How many angels can dance on the head of a pin?
Right.
All of this goes into that category.
That was the Christian version, and in Jewish version, you'd sit and study Talmud, where there'd be these hypothetical cases of no significance, and you could spend months or years reading the Aramaic transcripts and debating back and forth about things that have no significance at all, or reinterpreting things in ways that are clever but don't solve anything. But I kind of like that, you know, and I must be the only one here that likes that. But that, I guess, what can I say, Marcia?
But you like it, but you wouldn't do it it wouldn't be the only thing that you do. So that so many people who are the ultra observant in Israel, for instance, who don't contribute anything to the economy or to their families or to anything except the study itself, which they consider to be holy, I guess. So that excuses them in their minds, but that doesn't excuse it in the minds of the rest of the Jewish population. Yeah, there's a limit to how many of those angels you can have dancing in your head too, you know, so.
Where does that example come from? I think it's a Christian source, but I don't know. How many angels dance on the head of a pin?
We could Google it and find out.
I think it was a medieval Christian thinker that made that analogy, but there must be a Jewish parallel to that. There definitely is a Jewish parallel to that. All right, let's look at example number 2. Evelyn, page 106, right-hand column towards the top.
Example 2, Rabbi Menachem M. Schneerson, known as the Lubavitcher Rebbe, born 1902, teaches that the sanctuary built by the Jewish people in the desert symbolizes the sanctuary that is inside every Jew. Just as the sanctuary has an inner and outer altar, so each Jew, Schneerson writes, possesses a surface personality and an essential core. When the Torah says the fire on the altar shall be kept burning, not to go out, it is referring not only to the duty of the priest to keep the altar of the sanctuary burning, but also to the way in which one practices Jewish tradition. It is not a private possession to be cherished subconsciously, argues Rabbi Schneerson. It must show in the face of a person set towards the world. Using the symbol of the continually burning fire on the altar, Schneerson stresses that a Jew must be involved, bringing life and fire to the 3 aspects of Jewish existence. 1, to the learning of Torah, 2, to prayer, and 3, to the practice of charity. Words of Torah, he comments, should be spoken with fire. They should penetrate every facet of a person's being. In other words, learning not to be dull exercise, but a way of filling each person with a desire to practice the wisdom, ethics, and traditions of Torah. One's prayer must be done not as a routine, but as an expression of love for God and appreciation of the world created by God. In practicing the mitzvah of tzedakah or charity, it is not enough to provide money and services for the poor and sick. One must do it with an inner warmth that manifests itself outwardly, providing an example for others. In all these ways, the fire on the altar will be kept burning.
Okay. Do you like this example?
I apologize, but I must leave because I have an appointment. So I will see you no, I won't see you next week, but I'll talk to you. Bye-bye.
Good one.
Nice to meet you.
Bye, Evelyn. Pam,
Bye.
do you like this example better than the first one?
I like this guy.
This is the founder of Chabad. So we can do a field trip to the Chabad in Glendale or in Goodyear, and
Yeah.
there's a third Chabad in the West Valley. I just found out about in Anthem. So
Yeah.
there's 3 Chabads. We're surrounded by them practically.
Yeah, well,
So-
the Chabad in our area delivers a matzah every Passover to Dave personally.
So the Lubavitcher Rebbe is taking the text here where you're talking about a sanctuary, the tabernacle built in the desert, and he's making a metaphor about it. Does that work for you? I mean, Bernie, do you see the same problem with this as the first one, or are you more inspired?
It was good up until the last paragraph.
All right, take out the last paragraph.
Take out the last paragraph and I'll buy in.
And why do you find that useful or meaningful or acceptable?
But because he's not trying to make something out that isn't there.
Like the changing of the word. You
I
mean.
think the other guy was trying to make something, he was trying to explain away something. And this
Oh,
Schneerson is not doing.
but he is taking the meaning in the text and changing it completely and then making a metaphor out of it.
I don't see that.
All right, anybody else? Babette, Shirley, Donna,
Well,
Marcia?
the using the symbol, that paragraph is where you're seeing that the taking and making a metaphor, using the symbol. He says a Jew must be involved, bringing life and fire to the 3 aspects of Jewish existence. So that's where he's bringing the fire in to make it meaningful in today's world, I think.
But it's definitely a metaphor, and it's definitely trying to take something that's an obsolete practice that's no longer done, and to say, here's a contemporary interpretation of that. So it's okay to interpret, but it's not okay to change something that shouldn't be changed. It's obviously, misinterpreting a word deliberately. All right, I understand Bernie's logic there. Yes, Marcia.
I just want to intercept, it was Thomas Aquinas posed that question about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. He was known as the angelic doctor because he believed in angels and studied them, etc.
Okay.
Definitely Catholic.
Okay, but that's okay. But it'd be interesting to find the Jewish equivalent for that. There must be a specific
Right.
analogy of that. Other responses?
Well, I mean, I definitely have read something before that goes along the lines of this, that when we sanctify ourselves through our religious practices, we are able to understand with more clarity and maybe with enough intention or kavanah and direction of the heart, we might even merit revelation. So that burning, that eternal burning of fire, since we're not physically doing that because the temple no longer exists, I feel like, we have to find a way to create that, outward expression. And I think that one of the ways that we can do that is through our religious practices with ruah, with, intention, with passion. So, I mean, I definitely see kind of the direction he was going. I feel like maybe that kind of suggests maybe that's a good explanation of what I think he said.
And so we want to use this concept of fire to inspire us in new ways. And that is a good thing, even if we don't have the original institution is gone. And
Right, like the fire, the sparks of, your Pentiliad, light the sparks of that fire, internally.
And just like there's an inner altar and an external altar, so too with us, there's an inner part of our personalities and an external part. And each part can play a role in a certain way. So how many people like this interpretation a lot? Raise your hand. How many people like it medium, sort of okay, tolerable? How many people don't really like it much better than the first one? Okay. Number 3, we need a new reader. Okay, Babette.
Okay, example 3. The Yiddish commentator Jacob ben Isaac Ashkenazi, author of Tanakh Revena.
Sanorana, this was, I've mentioned this commentary before. This is the Yiddish commentary that was written by a male rabbi for women in Yiddish. Most Jewish women in Eastern Europe didn't read Hebrew, but they knew Yiddish. And so they, and it was filled with a lot of stories and things. Okay, sorry.
Notes that the Torah commands that the olah or burnt offering and the hanat or sin offering be sacrificed on the same altar. Why, he asks, are these two sacrifices to be made at the same place? He answers his own question by declaring that the Torah teaches us not to embarrass people. The burnt offering is brought by one who is guilty of sinful thoughts. Perhaps the person coveted something belonging to someone else, or thought about cheating or stealing from another person. A sin offering is a sacrifice brought by someone who has actually committed a wrongdoing. The Torah says Jacob ben Isaac Ashkenazi commands that both should offer their sacrifices in the same place, so no one will know the difference between the person who has sinned in thought and the person who has sinned in deed. In this way, embarrassment is avoided. No one can point an accusing finger and say, there is a thief. By calling attention to the detail of how the two sacrifices were to be offered, Jacob ben Isaac Ashkenazi emphasizes a significant ethical lesson. It is forbidden to humiliate or shame another person.
Okay, thank you. Comments on this one? Are we getting better, warmer, or colder?
Cold.
Sai and then Bernie.
Warmer, definitely.
Sai.
Cold.
Can't hear you, Sai. You have to unmute.
Sorry.
While he's doing that, I just wanted to comment, reminded me of Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
So what was it in Playboy magazine? They interviewed him and he
He
said,
sinned in his heart,
I have committed
He lost it
adultery
in his
my
heart.
heart.
something like that.
Lost it in my heart.
Lost it in his heart, right?
And people thought that was like funny, right?
Yeah, well, Bill Clinton did it in public, you know.
Well, it was a little different. Sai.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I take exception with all these rules in that they have to be written and that you have to either pray or remember or do something to act upon them. It's my feeling that once you're part of a society, when you're part of a large group, all of these things happen by themselves. In order to live with one another, all of these things happen. This is what makes, for example, our country what it is, not to the degree that we always like it, but better than a country, some other country where there's a lot of a problem. We learn from each other as we grow, as we associate, and these things really don't have to be forced upon us so that we have to think about them constantly. I think in most cases, they're all very, very natural.
Okay. Response to Sai? Marcia?
I liked what he said. I think that you do know what is right and wrong, and some of these specifics are almost, I can, that, what is the name of that book? Sana Urena.
Yeah,
It talks down to people. It's almost, it's very preachery and unnecessary. I think people know that it's a wrong thing to either embarrass somebody or to, act wrong in many different ways. I think we do know what is right and wrong. And I still think if we go back to the 10 Commandments, you could turn those around and pull from the 10 Commandments. So many of these other commandments are coming from that. They're just another interpretation of that, only just expressed in a slightly different way.
okay. Responses?
I definitely think that goes back to what I was saying earlier about doing what is right and good, which we learn about in Deuteronomy. And it's not that I pick and choose what commandments I'm going to follow. Like I said, the one where you stone somebody for not going to Shabbat, or not keeping the Sabbath, it's something I don't practice, but I justify not practicing it because it says do what is right and good.
But just interrupt, Lori, you can't practice that because with no temple, there's no Sanhedrin, and only a Sanhedrin could make legal decisions of that sort. So if you see somebody driving, you're not authorized in traditional Judaism to just take law into your own hands, quote unquote, and there's no Sanhedrin, so nobody can do that today.
Well, thank you for relieving me of that complication, because, I do try to keep the commandments because they're important to me and because we're commanded to do them. But I want to read something that Rashi said, because this is really important. I think a lot of Reform Judaism is based on this idea. And so I'm going to just read the verse real quick. It says, or part of the verse, do what is right and good in the sight of the Eternal, that it may go well with you. And what Rashi says here,
where are you reading from, Lori?
from a commentary from the Plout.
Okay, and this is the standard Reform
Correct.
Bible.
Right. So when I have a copy of this at home, and it says, rabbis did not consider right and good as synonyms. Rather, they took good to be an extension and widening of right. This is a new command not implied in any previous mitzvah. It means the moral obligation to go when necessary beyond what is legally required of us. So,
so good is a good thing, but right is an extension of that, and you can expand on that idea to beyond the basic things.
the letter of the law, beyond the letter of the law.
So you may be obligated to not, say nasty things about somebody, but, if you want to be right, you try to correct what other people are saying nasty things or something like that. You try to go beyond what you have to.
Let's just take, for example, if you were to ostracize somebody because of gender or because of the way they identify sexually, you know what I mean? Even though there is stuff in the Torah about, a man laying with a man being an abomination, this text is saying it gives you the new command not implied in any previous mitzvah. It means the moral obligation to go when necessary beyond what is legally required of us, because it's not good and it's not right to ostracize somebody. We're supposed to welcome people, and that's where I think it's not about choosing the mitzvah, which one I'm going to follow and which one I'm not. It's about being able to justify some of them, whether they are right and good. I think this was a great example of not doing something, not putting the burnt offering and the sin offering in the same place is a great example of not shaming somebody. That's doing something that is right and something that is good. Because
And
you're
also
not.
you're also not supposed to shame somebody because they're trying to fix the problem, right? So they're bringing sacrifice to say, I'm sorry for what I did. So you don't want to point out that they did this because they're trying to fix it.
Right, I mean, for sure. I mean, it would be like having a neon sign, I'm a sinner, if they had a specific place for just the sin offering, it'd be revealing. It would be wrong. It wouldn't be right and good.
And we know that in contemporary life, you probably learn not to volunteer too much information. I remember the first time I was stopped for speeding, and when I had to go to court, and the judge said, were you going 76 miles? I said, well, there was this hill, and it was just for about 4 seconds. I told him the truth. And he said, well, that's really, really fast. And he gave me $100 fine. And I expected a little bit of consideration for being totally honest. So then later I was in Israel, and they had a roadblock when they passed the seatbelt law. And the cops saw me at a distance putting on my seatbelt waiting for the roadblock. But he apparently had to have a confession because it was such a distance. So when he came up to me, he said, were you wearing your seatbelt the whole time? And I said, I'm an Oleh Hadash. I don't speak Hebrew very well. And I said, but yes, I was wearing my seatbelt the whole time. So he knew I was lying. So he said, it's not nice to lie, but he couldn't give me a ticket so you learn that sometimes being too honest, there's disincentives. But in Judaism, you want to encourage people to be more truthful and more sincere.
Right, it's definitely important to be forthright, but I mean, there are certain points where offering too much information is just going to become problematic. So if you can dance away from and segue into another subject, like how about those Dodgers might be a great remark at that point. I don't know, but I do understand what you're saying. I liked this example. I thought this was a really good example. And I think it really defends, the Torah, and what it teaches us, and, about loving thy neighbor. I think that falls under that category for sure. Or like Micah would say, do justly, love mercy, and, walk in humility with God. I think that's great.
Right. Yes, I used that as the quote in one of my books at the beginning, and then that's a great quote from the book of Micah. Any final comments? We're running toward the end, and I wanted thoughts on obsolete and generally what we've talked about. Pam.
Rabbi, I just want to hear, you said that it was your first ticket.
I have a long criminal record. That's why I had to escape to Arizona to get away from all my crimes and misdemeanors. But no, I drive very slowly. People make fun of me for I haven't gotten a speeding ticket in a long, long time. Does that make you happier?
Yes.
Comments on obsolete? Final thoughts. Bernie, Babette, Shirley, Cy, Donna, Lori, Marcia, Pam.
I'm not hearing you well enough. I'm trying to listen, but I'm not hearing you well enough to comment.
Can you hear me okay?
Everybody is very, very distant, and my daughter's going to recheck my computer this weekend.
Okay, Steve, any final?
Thank you.
No.
Well, I mean, sacrifices can be interpreted in a number of ways. I mean, if we fast or go on a diet, that's considered a sacrifice. So you can, huh?
No, that's different. If you go on a diet, that's different than sacrifice.
Yeah, but you're still sacrificing something that you really want to have as opposed to
But
what you should have.
Well, the Catholics give up something for Lent, something that they like.
Meat.
So I would give up like brownies for a whole month.
but
Cheesecake.
that's not a religious sacrifice.
No, it's not. It's not, but I'm using it as a comparison.
Yeah. I think, okay, hand up.
Yes, Marcia.
I think a lot of time, there are many instances where we're stuck with these sacrificial offerings and the way we turn things around to make it meaningful. I think that's interesting. It makes us think more. And that's what's important. How is it relevant to us? Instead of saying, oh, it's irrelevant, I'm just throwing it away, let's reconsider it and see if we can make it a relevant situation. I don't think that's wrong. I think that's an interesting opportunity for thought. Okay.
Okay, we have 2 or 3 minutes. Lori, do you want to
Sure,
introduce
sure.
yourself a little more in depth and tell us something about your background or interests or
Okay.
your synagogue over there in the large Jewish metropolitans of Phoenix / Scottsdale?
Yeah, it's a pretty large congregation. So just a little history on me. I'm Jewish by birthright. My mom was Bourbon. My dad is Rizzo. So my name is Lori Rizzo, but by birthright, I'm Jewish. I spent a lot of time in a conservative synagogue. At some point in my life, it seemed the right choice to go to Reform. I've been doing that for about 6 years, but prior to that, I was at Bethel. I was at the New Shul. Some of my favorite people in the whole wide world are Rabbi Wasserman and Rabbi Cantor. We have a nice synagogue. We have a nice Torah study on Saturday, but it always seems like I'm wanting more. So I do some classes at JTS, and then I saw your class and I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm going to join this class as well. So I'm really glad that I found it. This is great class. So
Is this similar to what so you go to the Congregation Beth Israel's Torah study on Saturday morning?
I do.
Is there what they do very different from what we did here this morning?
It's not very different at all. It's very similar. Sometimes they start with the pamphlets like you hand out, and the staff, whoever's leading the class, will talk about, their different ideas. Typically oftentimes we try to stick to the Parsha. So we'll start reading from the Parsha, and then people will start chiming in with their questions or their ideas and their thoughts. But oftentimes there are pamphlets that are not directly from the Parsha. If it's Passover, might have something to do with Passover or counting the Omer or something like that.
We're
So,
doing the same thing. We're
it really
going to
is.
the Haggadah next week, I think, for Passover.
Nice.
And that, I think, went out to you just this morning, I think.
Oh, good. Well, I would love to be able to continue joining. I think this is a great class. If I can share one last thing, though, before we go, since we're talking about sacrifices and we're talking about obedience to God, which is kind of how we started the class this morning. I believe God had commanded or had told Samuel, or God had told Saul to completely destroy the Amalekites, right? And instead of destroying everything to do with the Amalekites, he didn't destroy the king himself, I believe, and he didn't destroy the king of Amalek, and he didn't just destroy all of the herds, the cattle, or the animals for one reason or another, but they were going to use them for sacrifices. So since we're talking about sacrifices, Samuel says, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obedience to the Lord's command? Surely obedience is better than sacrifice, compliance than the fat of rams. So, I definitely feel that that's an important thought to take with us. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like I said, Judaism teaches that obedience to the will of God is rewarded, disobedience is punished. So with that being said, that kind of supports my belief system there, what I've learned. So I definitely feel like it's important we know that what God is asking of us is really important, that we're obedient to it, but we also need to do what is right and good.
Amen.
Okay.
Thank you, Laurie. And back to you, Steve, for the final blessing.
Okay. Baruch atah
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emes, v'chaye olam nata b'tochenu.
Baruch
Atah
atah
Adonai
noten
noten
haTorah.
haTorah.
Blessed
Blessed
is
is
Adonai
Adonai
our
our
God,
God, ruler of the
universe,
who has given us the
teaching of
truth,
implanting within us
giving
eternal life.
life.
Blessed is Adonai,
Adonai,
giver of the Torah. Amen.
Amen.
All
Bernie,
right, everyone, Bernie, you have a comment or just saying goodbye?
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Well, wait a sec. So next week,
Thank
we're
you.
gonna do this on the Haggadah, not from the book. Is that what the story is?
I believe so. You'll get the email about it.
Oh, it says elective. Okay. Right.
If there's a way that I could get a copy of the prayer before, because you say it a little differently in the prayer after, I'd love a copy of that.
Okay.
Yeah, Steve, maybe, Steve
I'll-
can arrange that.
Okay,
Hmm,
I can do that.
Do you need my,
Lori, if you'll stay on for a little bit after we close, I'll
get my email?
get your email address and stuff.
Okay, thank you.
I just
Yeah.
want to say, Dave has surgery this afternoon, just everybody.
Oh,
Oh,
Oh.
didn't know that. Good luck to him.
yeah, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All
Yeah.
right, we'll say a Mishabara for him, definitely. Okay, good luck. Thank you for joining us, Lori.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so nice to hear new voices.
Oh, good. I'm glad that you said
And
that.
in different interpretations.
Right.
Oh, good. Oh, well,
I
have
see your congregation is doing a Yom HaShoah thing, April 5th. It's not, it couldn't be the 5th, but some other day. And our temple is listed as one of your partners on there. So,
Oh, great. Excellent. So maybe I'll get to meet some of you in person.
okay,
Oh, that'd
take
be
care.
great.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So
Okay,
you guys
Laura,
stay on.
go ahead and give me your email address.
It's really simple. It's Jewish family, all one word at cox.net. Thank you so much for sending that.
Emily at what now?
Cox.net.
At Cox.
Yeah.
Jewish family at cox.net.
That's me.
Okay, I'll send that information to you right away.
Okay, thank you. It was really
You're
nice to
welcome.
meet you all. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Enjoyed it. Bye-bye.